Welcome to the Unfiltered Show, live on tape from the Score Studios. We're like a late-night show here. I'm Joseph Casciaro. That's Tyler McKillop. Joining us remotely for the second week in a row, John Henson.
How you guys doing, man? Hey, finals is coming. I'm ready for some high-level basketball.
Yeah. What did we have? Did we have one or two games? I think we had two games from the last time we spoke with him.
We
right?
had no.
We talked before Game 4?
We talked before Game 4. Yeah, so we had two games in the West Final. The Celtics have been off the whole time, but yeah, like John said, we're ready for the finals. It should be high-level basketball because these are two great teams. When you're talking about the Celtics and the Mavs and what they've been since the deadline. So let's get right into it, John. We'll start with you. How much do you look at like past regular season matchups? Like when you're looking at, even as a former player going into a series, or now as a retired player who's doing some analysis, you're going into a series. How much are you looking at how they matched up in the regular season and maybe what each team did strategy wise in the regular season, or are you throwing that all out the window when it's playoff time?
I'm definitely not throwing it all out the window. The Celtics did beat them by 28
Yeah.
Last time they played, but the Mavs were coming on a 4-game road trip. They had lost, they ended up losing 7 out of 8 in that stretch. They made a lineup change and ended up winning the last 16 out of 18. So a little bit of a grain of salt, but it is kind of a look into that matchup because both teams were – they even had P.J. Washington. The lineup was a little different. I don't think Lively and Diafra were in the lineup as much as they are now. But I'm definitely looking at that, and it kind of raises my eyebrow because I don't care how many road trip or how long you've been on a road trip. Losing by 30 is losing by 30. So on paper, I do like the Celtics.
Yeah.
The Celtics have won all four, or I think since Kyrie's been there? All four matchups they won by at least 9, right?
Yeah, and I believe Kyrie's winless in Boston or against the Celtics is like a 0-8 since leaving Boston all those years back. And yeah, to John's point, Celtics win by 28 in the only matchup they had post-deadline, but Gafford only played 6 minutes off the bench. Derrick Jones Jr. wasn't in the lineup that night. He's now a starter. So, I guess on some level you can look at it as the Mavs were missing 2/5 of their current starting lineup, but, it was still similar to the total rotation they had now, and the Celtics just absolutely mopped the floor with them.
They also are playing a lot differently since they've made those changes and adding Washington, just in terms of the pick and roll game's killer, obviously, for them. And then also they've been a little bit more, I feel like they've definitely played around the rim a lot more since post All-Star break and these additions that I'm interested to see, because obviously with the way Boston defends, I'm pretty sure they're the best rim protecting team defensively.
They're the best
this
overall
season.
defensive team, yeah.
Other than
the second best.
Minnesota
Sorry,
was,
they
right?
were the second best defense all year. And obviously a big part of that is all of these guys, but Jrue Holiday, huge part of it. One thing I wanted to get into is in that matchup, again, if we can take anything away from it, they started with Jrue on Kyrie, and they had Jaylen Brown on Luka Doncic. Now, John, do you think that's the way they go to start this series in terms of guarding Dallas's big two? I know sometimes the Celtics will put Derek White on the other team's best guard, and they'll have Jrue kind of guard a non-threat so he can be a helper. The only thing with that in this series is, do you think then on the switch, do you think Derek White can guard Luka? That's the only reason I'm thinking maybe they start with Jrue on Kyrie. What's your take on that?
It's going to be a chess match. I've had Jay Kidd as a coach and Sweeney, the defensive guy over there, who was our defensive super brain. They're going to take away kind of what the Boston wants to do. And with this reference to with the defense on the Celtics, you've got two all defensive guys, right? Jrue Holiday, Derek White.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Jaylen Brown has been his main matchup, right? Yeah. So you're sitting there with 3 to 4 guys. You could throw at him at any different time, foul trouble, and give him different looks. And I treat Luka and Kyrie like quarterbacks, like a Pat Mahomes, right? If you let him see the same thing every time, he's going to carve you up. So I think Boston's switchability is going to be the story of this series. It's on paper, man. Like I said, on paper, it should be Celtics all the way. If you're looking at the numbers, even from a standpoint of the Mavs love corner threes, Celtics give up the least amount of corner threes.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to bet the defense travels on that part as well. So Boston should be okay, but Luka is a type of player that can literally win them a series. And so that's, I think, the scary part about everything.
Yeah, like that's the thing. Luka's the great equalizer, and I love Jason Tatum. Love like the Celtics top 6 is incredible. I don't think there's any argument here, right? That Dallas has the best player in the series, and it's not particularly close. And that's not a knock on Tatum. That's just like a praise of how great Luka is. And so, while I agree with John that like the Celtics, the defense and everything, they're the better team. But Dallas has at least more than a puncher's chance in this series because of one Luka and also the team they've built again post deadline. Right? They were top 7 on both ends of the court, 21-9 post deadline.
And they were again. It doesn't. This whole series, I think we know is going to come down to 3-point shot making because that's been the Celtics game all year. They're taking their 3-point rate. I think what is it like 47, 48% of their shots
in the league by far. Yeah.
And dude, both teams are such because post All-Star break again. I keep saying this. Dallas was one of the best rim protecting teams in the NBA too with the additions. So I do think this is going to come down to 3-point shot making. And obviously on paper, the Celtics have been better all season in doing that. But I don't want to get into everything all at once here, but what I love about this Mavs team that I haven't liked about the Celtics throughout this entire postseason is late game execution. Like the late game shot making. I found myself seeing Derek White making those types of shots more often than I see Jaylen Brown and I see Jason Tatum, who are more typically the guys who have the ball in their hands in those types of situations. So I do think, and this is what I'm super excited about for this series, I think you're going to see a lot of games coming down to the final few minutes, and I think there's a really good chance the Mavs, as they've proven throughout this postseason, execute better in those situations than Boston does.
Well, they've got the 2 best closers. Again, I mean, I said they've got the best player in the series. They have the 2 best closers in the series. I mean, you could argue they've got the 2 best closers in basketball, maybe, or at least in the conversation in Luka and Kyrie. One thing, though, I do think is interesting, because Tyler was just mentioning how the Celtics, maybe it feels like they're not doing well in crunch time, or even we've talked, I think, last week about how, like, it feels like the Celtics are kind of underwhelming, but then you look at the overall body of work and it's like, actually, they're dominating. The playoffs is another good example, right? Because it feels like they had their foot off the gas against these like wounded, inferior opponents. And then I looked at the numbers. So in addition to being 12-2 in the playoffs, they've got the 10th best postseason point differential of all time right now. But it doesn't feel like that. Like, it doesn't feel like they're dominating like that, but I guess they are.
Yeah, they are dominating from a standpoint of numbers, but they've pretty much beaten wounded teams and teams that have. Meanwhile, the Mavs have eliminated 3 of the top 4 teams in the West, right? So they're battle tested. I think you're getting the Celtics. I mean, think about if the Celtics would have been. I mean, I guess they're 12-2, so playing better than 12-2.
Yeah.
Like, they're already super favored from a Vegas standpoint. But when you look at what they've done throughout the season, they've got like the most 30-point wins. I mean, you can just go down the list. They've legit dominated their competition. And for me, when I'm looking at it, I'm like, have the Celtics even hit their stride yet? Like, with Porzingis potentially coming back, now you get a rim protector. The Pacers shot 74% at the rim against the Celtics. That doesn't happen with a guy like Porzingis. So that adds a whole nother dynamic defensively. And we're not even talking about offensively where, there's a statistics. I think when Porzingis is out for a week or more, he shoots over 50% when he returns. So it's a lot of stuff that comes into play that kind of has you lean in Boston. But this is the playoffs and anything can happen. But, I mean, a championship would kind of be finishing a more dominant run than we've seen in the past.
Yeah. So I want to jump on the Porzingis thing, because we talked about this last week about when I asked you about that big piece being missing and getting that good performance in that kind of initial game, because the opposing team doesn't have a great feel of what to expect. How is it on the flip side of getting a piece like that back? Because I obviously think defensively, like if Porzingis is on the floor or when Horford gets on the floor, that's probably something that the Mavs look to attack. And Porzingis is such a great rim defender, so he'll definitely be helpful defensively. But what do you think? Could there be a negative impact to bringing him back in terms of, obviously, we don't have a feel of the minutes that they'll be giving him, and also, will it hinder what this offense has been doing for the last, what has it been, 3-4 weeks since he's been on the floor?
Yeah, you just don't know how they're going to play his minutes. How much is he going to play? What is he going to be doing? But it's the finals, and I think they're going to implement him heavily. People aren't really talking about it, but I think Maxi Kleber is a guy that's going to be an X factor, because I think Porzingis kind of eliminates Gafford and Lively from being around the rim and being effective, because he's going to bring him out on the perimeter. And even with the switchability, yes, Horford's older. Yeah, Horford, can't stand in front of a Kyrie or a Luka consistently. But I think where Dallas gets you in trouble is when you let someone gets in front of you and is overhelping, corner threes in the lob. So I think if Boston switches everything, guards your yard, eliminates the corner threes, I think that's the formula. And Porzingis goes a long way to helping that.
Yep.
And then, you could play big. You could go Horford and Porzingis. I mean, it just adds a whole nother dynamic to that team. So he's probably the most important player in the series. And then with Dallas, Maxi Kleber, how healthy is he? Is he going to be able to stay with Porzingis and bring Porzingis out and make him play a little bit of defense? So it's going to be a chess match, man. Game one's going to be fun, but it's far from over as far as these adjustments.
Yeah, I'm fascinated to see how all those adjustments play out. So Porzingis said, not sure if it was media day or just like a pre-finals team media scrum, but someone asked Porzingis today if he's now running pain-free, given that he's been cleared to play in game one. And he had this 10-second pause, and then he just smiles and he says, yeah, which leads me to believe it's, he's probably not 100%, but it's the NBA Finals and he's been off long enough. So it'll definitely be interesting to see how much of a factor he can be in this series, because offensively, if he can pull the Mavs, like if with Porzingis in there, the Celtics are 5 out. You could say that about Horford too, but definitely more so with Porzingis.
Right.
And the Mavs really haven't had to combat that in these playoffs yet. Like we talk about how improve their defense is, they haven't really had a 5-out challenge yet. So I think that's interesting. And then on the defensive end, because John, you were mentioning how Dallas likes to, they like to do their thing and they rely on teams then overhelping and sending extra bodies and they create those corner threes. But with Boston's switchability, like Boston doesn't like to double because they feel like they don't have to with how switchable they are. So I'm fascinated to see that chess match you talk about, because on paper, it seems like Boston, with the switchable defenders, they shouldn't have to double and send extra bodies and they can stay home and protect the perimeter. But I'm curious from your perspective, John, from being on the court, how quickly does a team abandon a strategy based on how hot a player is? So, like, for example, we know the Celtics don't like to double because of how switchable and versatile they are. But if Luka is cooking, which, he's obviously liable to do, and it's early, even say game one, like, when you were on teams, how quickly would that change of strategy happen? If, say, you were supposed to stay out of doubles, you were switching everything, but then a guy like a Luka is cooking you for a quarter and a half. Is that enough to, like, veer from the game plan, or do you have to stay in it and say, no, like, we got to let this ride out. We need the process to, like, the sample size to be bigger and all that?
Boston for sure has a contingency on if Luka or Kyrie, for that matter, start cooking. But it just all depends on the type of shots Luka. I mean, if Luka's hitting tough contested 2s and 3s, we'll live, right? Percentage-wise, over 7 games, he shouldn't hit those. If he does, we tip your hat. So there's definitely a contingency plan. But with the personnel Boston has, I don't think you need to double-team Luka. That's how you get in trouble, right? And if you are going to double-team him, you double-team him across half, get the ball out of his hands. Lively's a better playmaker than Gafford, so he's a big piece for them. But Boston should be able to guard Luka admirably. I'm not saying they're going to stop him. He's second highest scoring average in the playoff history behind Jordan. But make him take tough shots, get the ball out of his hand, make him get tough looks. And if he hits him, you tip your hat. So Boston's ready for that. But I think for the first few games, I think they'll be fine. They can literally throw 4 guys on him. And we haven't even talked about, is Luka like fully healthy? They said he would have been sitting out for weeks if this was a regular season game or last series when he was hurt with his calf or knee, or I think he's banged up everywhere. So
round 1.
Yeah, we don't know. Yeah, we don't know how healthy he is, right? Like his sufficiency is down, his scoring is down, so he's clearly not 100%. I think an injured Luka, Boston should be okay.
Yeah, and that's another thing. The same day that Porzingis talked about, or kind of laughed off the question about whether he's running pain-free, Luka was asked about the knee and if all this time off has like helped him, whatever, and he said that it hasn't gotten better, but I guess the time off has made it so that it hasn't gotten worse. So that very much sounds like, one of those injuries that it's not going to get better over the course of the playoffs or the finals. It's just he's going to have to dog it out until the offseason, then I guess we'll end up finding out what the injury is.
And, he's got to guard Tatum or Brown.
Yeah.
Or Jrue. I hope that offensively he'll be fine, but defensively you're going to wonder how they're going to counter that, knowing that he's not fully healthy and they need him to carry the offensive load.
Yeah. And that to me is the biggest difference between these two teams. And again, not a knock on the Mavs, just more so praise of the team the Celtics have built, where like even great teams and even great players on great teams, there's usually at least one or two players on even great teams where it's like maybe they're offensive stars, but they're defensive liabilities, or they're great defenders that can't shoot, so the other team won't guard them or something. The thing that fascinates me about the Celtics is they really don't have one of the, like, their top six is so good on both ends. It's not like you can be like, okay, this guy's a great defender, but we don't have to guard him. No, you got to guard everyone on that team. Or like, it's not like you can be like, oh, Tatum and Brown, great offensive players that can't defend. They're great defenders. Maybe Al Horford, you can attack him in space. We've seen teams do that. Right.
Maybe.
Right. But he's an underrated defender too, even at his age. So it's like, there's not really like a weak spot or a pressure point to hit. And I know Luka can do it against anyone, but I just think this is the team that is as well built as possible to stop what he and Kyrie and this Mavs team do.
Yeah, I think we talked about this before the series with Minnesota, but you look back and you have the hindsight, you kind of understand where those those matchup advantages lied in that lack of switchability, because it's crazy how we felt about that T-Wolves team heading into the previous series, and now how we feel about this series. I do feel like people are definitely feeling somehow feeling higher on the Mavs than they were the Celtics heading into each of the East and Western Conference Finals. I feel like a lot of people feel like the Mavs have a legitimate shot to be 6, 7, potentially even win this thing too.
Oh yeah, they got a
shot.
Yeah,
you definitely, and that's another thing too. Everyone's been so heavy on the Celtics. Now people are finally leaning to the Mavs.
Yeah,
and so you wonder how that works, because the minute you stop believing in the Celtics, they're going to come on and be like, well, what were we thinking? Because if you put this into how you do the NBA 2K simulation for the season, if you put this on paper and stats and everything, Celtics should win 4-1, 4-2. Shouldn't be that big of a sweat, right? But we would have said that about the Timberwolves series against the Mavericks, right?
Yeah.
Luka doesn't hit that three. It's 1-1 going into Dallas, 2-1, 2-2 coming back to Minnesota. So, that one shot changed the whole complexion of the series, which is what happens. But Mavericks are definitely live dogs. But like I said, man, I woke up this morning. I was excited to come talk to you guys. I'm researching. I'm looking at all the numbers and stats. And, I mean, Celtics should roll. But it's basketball. So, and it's sports. And that's why we love it. We don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah. I've been it's funny you say that, John, because I felt the exact same way all week. I've kind of been like, I really do like this Mavs team and the way that they've just kind of clutched up in so many important moments of the postseason, and the Celtics. I'll be honest, I'm a Celtics hater. when Tatum was, what was that? Was that game 3 or when did they go to OT against Indiana?
It was game
and Tatum
1.
was just
it was game 1.
Atrocious in the final 2 minutes, and I'm like, this is the guy that he is. Like, we can't trust this guy. And then he put up 11, 12 points in OT to win the game. I'm like, that doesn't matter to me. Like, those final 2 minutes in regulation, he was terrible. But I do feel now that I get into the numbers and just the way that the Celtics, obviously we talk about defensively, but also offensively, they're not a super reliant team in getting points at the rim. Like, if they're making their threes like they have been all year, 38, 39%.
They had the most efficient offense ever.
Yeah. So, and the way they match up defensively is like, I don't see the Mavs in a very good spot here matchup wise.
Yeah. It's tough. John, before we move on to the next segment, I actually want to ask you, because you brought up how you've played for Coach Kidd before, obviously in Milwaukee. From what he was then, which was his second job, because he had the Brooklyn job first, from what he was when he coached you to what you see now in Dallas, whether it's like the in-game adjustments, in-series adjustments, he's had a good playoff run. He's gone to the conference finals with this team twice in 3 years. Like, what have you seen different, maybe, in terms of how he's coached his team compared to what he was back then? And maybe there isn't a difference. Maybe you always thought he was kind of this guy and, he's just had better teams over the years. So, what would you say about Jason Kidd, the coach now, compared to when you had him?
Well, when I had him with 3 or 4 years, I believe. X's and O's, cerebralness, what to look for. Like, he's top tier. Like, he sees the floor differently. He sees the game differently. And his staff is really good as well, complimenting him. And he also does a good job of letting players talk and letting players, especially in these film sessions, what do you guys want to do? Hey, how do you guys feel? He'll ask questions and things like that. So I think he's only gotten better. I mean, there's a reason that he's one of the best point guards ever, played for 20 years. Everywhere he went, he adjusted, he got better, he took what he did wrong and made it better. So I think he's doing that as a coach. And as you can see, 2 out of 3 last year, he's been to the Western Conference Finals. So I just can't say enough. I also, look, I got paid over there. I played over there. I made a name for myself. So I love J Kidd and the guys over there. And he's special, man. There will be times in practice, I'll never forget it, man. I think it was MCW or Chris Middleton was taking it out. And J Kidd was, he'll be on the sideline and he'll be watching and he'll kind of look and he'll turn to you and be like, you don't see that? And he'll be like, what? He'll be like, give me the ball. He makes this like otherworldly pass that no one else saw to the guy that's open under the rim. And we have to be like, okay, coach, like we're not Hall of Fame point guards for a reason. Like no one's going to make that pass, let alone have the gumption to make that pass, but like see it, that like no one's doing that, man. So look, we're just gonna throw it to the corner and go when I play like coach. No one's seeing that. So that's J Kidd in a nutshell.
Are those types of moments? Because it's funny, we talked about this. We talked about this in episodes before about just all the coaching changes we've seen or from some of these postseason teams, and people talk about the respect that players have for their coaches that have played in the league and those that haven't. Is it that simple, or is it those types of moments in terms of X's and O's that is like that brings that ultimate type of respect for these guys that have obviously played the league and are now coaching, as opposed to the guys that I guess straight up just haven't?
Yeah, because you have coaches that get respect for different things. J Kidd, Hall of Famer, All-Star, Olympian, gold medalist. So like you got no choice but to listen and understand and respect what he has to say. If he says you suck, then you probably suck. I'm just gonna be honest with you, right? Like that's just how it is, right? And so with J Kidd, it's the same way. The minute he walks into that building, you got to respect it. And then on the other end, the X's and O's, the knowledge of the game, the respect he has for his players, also holding everyone accountable. It's all encompassing, and he has all that. So it's no secret that the Mavs are successful as they are. He was one of my favorite coaches, and I learned a lot from just observing him on a day-to-day basis. And he taught us a lot, how to win, how to be a team player, things we didn't know when we had won 15 games and he was coming in. So I love J Kidd. I respect him, and I'm happy for him to be where he's at.
The job with Kyrie this year has just been incredible.
Kyrie's been about his business on the court for the first time in a long time. He's been reliable for them. So Kidd has to take at least some of the credit for that. John, I am glad you brought up those Milwaukee years, because to end the show later, we are going to get into a couple stories with you from your Milwaukee days.
Gotcha.
Before we do that, let's just get through this exercise quickly that I thought could be fun. We can start with John. We already agreed that Luka's the best player in this series, but if you had your pick of the top 4 players, the big 4 in this series being Luka and Tatum and Kyrie and Jaylen Brown, how would you rank those guys in terms of like who you would want going into a finals?
Yeah, obviously we're going Luka first, right? All time, everything, playoffs. I mean, 5-time all, first team. I mean, just, we can go all day. Then I'm going to go Tatum. I feel like Tatum hasn't hit a stride yet. And if you have one blemish, the one blemish in Tatum's career was that finals performance.
Yeah.
And so I'd really be willing to bet that's not going to happen again. And then this is where I had a tough one. I'm going to go Kyrie only because of the experience. He has the ring. But when you look at what Jaylen Brown has done, even in the final series where Tatum didn't really come to play, he was arguably the best player for the team. And then in the Eastern Conference Finals, he was the best player for his team. So I had a hard time putting him at 4, but I put Kyrie above because experience, he's got a ring, and he's going to bring a calmness to that team. But that would be my 4. But, I mean, from 2, 3, and 4 could be interchangeable to me, man. They're both really good.
Yeah, I agree with that. Tyler, my question for you is, do you agree with this? Because after those top 4, here's why I think Boston has the edge in this series. Because while I agree with John's ranking and Luka being 1, and probably Kyrie being 3 as well, I think you can then make the argument that if you take the top 6 from each team, 5 to 8 are then all Celtics, and then it's 9-12. And again, it's not a knock on guys like Washington and Jones and Gafford and Lively. It's just that when you're talking about Jrue Holiday, Derek White, Kristaps Porzingis, and even Al Horford at this age, I feel like you'd probably take all 4 of those guys before you take one Maverick. Am I crazy for saying that?
I would agree with I would probably go Washington before I went Horford.
Okay.
Because I love the way Washington's play. Like, I think he's been a huge reason why they're here, why they got here. I would definitely take. You were saying it. I'm like, yeah, Derek White, Porzingis. Then I went, and Jrue Holiday,
right?
Like NBA champion Jrue Holiday. Yep. I'm forgetting. So I would easily take those three guys, no doubt.
Yeah,
Horford would be the one I'd think about.
And that's the thing, right? Like those top four, even though Luka's the best, are so tight. And then I feel like, and then you get to those other guys, and they're all Celtics. Like we're saying, all those Celtics guys are better. I just feel like as we talk about it, the Celtics have that edge.
I know, but I would even say on John's list of like, I don't have an explanation. I'm more intangibles of like, again, the Kyrie late game execution. I love seeing that. Jaylen Brown not making the free throws.
You're about to go Celtics top 2, aren't you?
I'm about to go Mavs top 2.
You're about to go Mavs 1-2. Wow.
Again, I'm telling you guys.
And no one's gonna be mad though. No one's gonna be mad.
No, exactly.
Luka and Kyrie, as far as late game execution, Kyrie and Luka get really good shots.
Yeah.
Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown make tough shots, right? It's a little bit of a difference. Now, either way, they're still coming up clutch, but like Luka's late game scenarios and Kyrie's late game scenarios, they're getting good shots. Tatum and Brown are just so freaking good.
Yeah.
The ball goes in, man. So either way to get it done. But if you want to talk about coming down to the end of the game, as you said earlier, you're probably going to take Luka and Kyrie 9 times out of 10.
Yeah. I would agree from a full 48 minutes type of deal. Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum would probably be right up there.
Yeah, and you mentioned NBA champion Jrue Holiday. Jrue Holiday, I just have to throw this out there, has one of my favorite career arcs in all of my basketball watching years. This a 2-time All-Star, but the 2 appearances were a decade apart.
Yeah,
NBA champion. He's been voted by his peers like the best teammate in the league, I think 3 times, at least twice. Mm-hmm. And then he signed multiple $100+ million contracts in his 30s. So just like one of my favorite career arcs in terms of like how long he's been doing it and really like not letting up, if anything, getting better with age.
Yeah.
He's just one of those players that's just integral in success. And when you have a guy like that, I would argue to say that Jrue Holiday signing that extension for $135 million is a steal, right? If he goes into the open market, someone's probably going to overpay to get him because he's that important to team chemistry. He defends, he minds his business respectfully, he plays within himself, he plays through, he plays his role, and he's the 3rd, 4th guy. Like he would probably be the best 3rd or 4th option in the league right now. If you do the numbers, contractually numbers wise, with what he brings, I think that was an easy decision for Boston to pay him all that money.
Yeah,
agreed. Yeah,
and just the fit and embracing that role. Too. Yeah, there's so many guys that you want to, you could put in that role that might not embrace the role too, and he does it better than anybody else.
Yeah, giving him that extension puts the Celtics further into that, probably second apron, especially because they already gave Brown that huge contract. Now Tatum's going to be extension eligible for a Supermax. But at the end of the day, hey, if ownership's willing to pay that tax bill, it's going to be hard for them to add parts around them. But this top 6 is pretty much locked in for the next little while. or most of it is anyway. So there are times when it's worth it. And if they're going to continue to compete for championships every year, definitely think it's worth it.
Do not let the Celtics lose this series and then pay Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, and Derek White's not back. The assassin that is Derek White is not back. And I start talking about this team.
And I forget who was talking about it. They were it may have been Jason Redick or maybe Austin Rivers, but I was listening to them and they were pretty much, what organization wouldn't want to go to the finals 6 out of the last 8 years, 2 finals appearances, top of the East for the last decade? People create this narrative, but any owner would love that, regardless of winning a championship. So sometimes the media narratives kind of dampen things, but Boston has stayed true. And remember the narrative of splitting up Brown and Tatum and blowing it up. Brad Stevens was listen, we're not going to get 2 guys that are younger and better than these 2. We're going to have to figure it out. And that's what they did.
Yeah. And to your point, I know obviously, they want to win at least one and fans will see it as a failure if they don't get at least one. But from an ownership perspective, management, coaching, even as a fan, if you just, remove yourself from the passion of the moment, the heat of the moment, if someone tells you, look, you can't guarantee you a championship, but your team's going to the conference finals 6 times in 8 years and 2 finals in 3 years. Like, you're taking that and laughing. You're not even thinking about it because that gives you the best chance to win, like being there every year.
Eventually, you're going to kick the door down.
Right.
I don't care what you say. If you keep getting there, you're going to win, right? Like, that's just the nature of the beast. Unless Michael Jordan's there, right? But other than that, you're going to get at least one if you keep getting there.
Well, we talked about this being like a change in the guard type of postseason. At the end of the day, I don't want to say it's a veterans league, but it's a league built on experience. Like, these guys are still super, super young. You probably haven't seen Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown play the best basketball of their careers, and you're experiencing this type of success when it comes to playing in the finals, playing for conference championships. So definitely giving these guys time is going to be beneficial for them too, or has been.
Yeah, agreed.
Being patient.
All right, let's end this episode with some story time with John Henson. John, I'll be honest, this worked out great for Tyler and I from a content perspective because with you being on the last couple of weeks, all of a sudden your name being mentioned on a couple player pods. And like I said, happy to see that because it works out well for us. So the first one was Matt Barnes on a podcast talking about wanting to fight you back in 2016. Matt told his side of the story on the podcast. His side of the story was that you were throwing some hard fouls in garbage time of a game with your team up big, your Bucks against his Grizzlies, and that after, I think, blocking one of his shots, he claimed you said something along the lines of, like, you want some of this or something like that, and that you guys were both ejected, and that he claims he was looking for you in the back. He was even waiting by the team bus. So we've got the Matt Barnes side of the story. What's John Henson's side of this story from 2016?
It had been a long – I was coming back from a back injury, right? I'm coming back from the back injury. Coach Kidd pulls me to the office. He's like, hey, Jay, like, look, man, we need you, man. Like, can you suit up tonight? I could have used a couple extra days, but I said, you know what, coach, like, if you're coming to me and say you need me, like, sure, right? I don't play the whole first half. I played the last 2 minutes. I am livid. I'm pissed. So I go out there like a bat out of hell. I'm running around. I'm playing well, actually. So second half comes around. I'm in the rotation. And I foul Lance Stevenson. I got a flagrant foul on Lance Stevenson. Me and him had history from past games. There was my opportunity to kind of get him back, and me and him both got technicals and did the whole NBA thing, like we're gonna fight, and get to the free throw line. And Matt Barnes is saying something to me. I'm like, why are you speaking to me? This has nothing to do with you. And he took it as a form of disrespect. So he's like, oh, you disrespectful young cat. Like, oh, you disrespectful. Okay. And I was like, kind of brushed it off, waved him off, whatever. And then the play comes where we're up 8 with like 30 seconds left. Mind you, I just came back from injury. Coach wasn't playing me in the first half. I'm trying to make the rotation. I really didn't care who it was. It could have been you guys trying to lay the ball up. I would have blocked it too and yelled. So I blocked the shot. I give a snarl. I don't say you want some of this. That's not even in my vocabulary. That's not even how I talk. So I didn't say any of that. I just made a mean mug. I went to the bench. My teammates, Giannis and all them guys are sitting down. Starters are sitting down laughing and playing around. I'm just so angry. So ref comes over like, Tech, get out of here. Like, you're gone. And then I think what made Matt so mad is he got a tech too. And really, I don't think he deserved it. But it was the end of the game. They were trying to defuse the situation. He gets a tech. I go to the locker room. All I hear is, get ready, Jay. He's coming. Get ready. And so we have a back door that you can go into. So I turn around. I said, well, here we go. Right? Like this has been the locker room too. Ain't nobody gonna stop it unless the trainers come out the blue. The trainers ain't stopping 2 NBA athletes, unfortunately. So as I'm waiting, I hear a commotion in the front door of the locker room because that's the other entrance. And long story short, the security had grabbed him up before he got through the door. But if he would have got through that door, he would have had me dead to rights. My back was facing towards the door. I would have been in trouble. And after the game, they were like, they took my keys. They said, you can't leave because he's waiting on you. I said, man, come on, man. Like, I can't leave. Like, this is the NBA. Like, we're going to, like, what's going to happen? Knockdown, drag out? Like, that's not about to happen. So they made me wait in the locker room. They took my car, pulled it around the other side of the arena, and it was a whole bunch of hoopla. But that was one of those memorable days of my career. Even for the fans, they love me talking about it because it was just one of those moments where the whole crowd was cheering. We had just won, and
And you were asking for it too. I think I went back and watched the clip. Like you were doing the almost like the Hulk
Yeah.
Hogan, like give me more noise.
Yeah, I was like, come on. You know, I was. It was just a rough day for me, man. And when you play in the NBA, man, you play every day. You know, kid sick, you have a bad day, your girlfriend breaks up with you, get a flat tire. Who knows, right? But you have to go play. So a lot of times when you see these guys get into these arguments, you just catch them on the right day where they're like, you know what, like I'm not in a good space today. Don't try me, right? And that was kind of the day that what happened with me. You know, I was so angry. I got double teed up. And you know, with Matt, I don't know what was going on with him, but he could have been having a bad day too. And it exploded. And you know, we laugh about it now, but it was pretty intense at the moment, for sure.
Yeah, I think that's good perspective though that you added at the end, where it's like, you know, I think a lot of times fans do forget that that
we're playing for a job, we're playing for our lives.
At the end of the day, for you guys,
it's a job.
I'm sure it's still, don't get me wrong, a passion, but it is your job and your livelihood, and you go to work the same way the rest of us go to different jobs with stresses and things that happen, and I think a lot of times people do forget that, so I think that's good perspective. Also,
nobody's taking my keys though and telling me I can't leave my job. Though.
No. Listen, well, you know when you come in, you have to give them the keys, right? Because it's like valet. So like they're like, you can't leave, and I'm like, I'm leaving. They're like, well, you can't drive. We took the keys, so I'm just like, I sat in the locker room, cracked open the beer. I was like, all right, well, I guess I'll just chill until it's over.
That's hilarious. Also good to hear, though, because I was going to ask if you've interacted with Matt at all since, but it sounds like you have. You said you guys laugh about it now.
Yeah, like I haven't interacted with him, but, you know, it's just heat of the moment type thing. And you know, when he was saying on the pod, like, I was like, you want some of this, you want some of this. Like, you know, Matt's known, you know, for getting into skirmishes and being on that type time. Like, I was just a young kid trying to get into the rotation and make a name for myself in the league. He was already like 14, 15 years in, champion, like all types of stuff. So I was just trying to be who I was and become who I am. And, you know, unfortunately, we got caught up together that one night.
All right. And then lastly, can you give us some behind the scenes memories of your practice time against Giannis in Milwaukee? Because on Thanasis' podcast, he and Michael Carter-Williams specifically mentioned you when talking about good veteran mentors that Giannis had back in the day. And then they mentioned how you and Giannis really used to go at each other all the time at practice. So can you give us some insight and some behind the scenes of what they were talking about there? Yeah,
you know, like I was a competitor. Giannis was young at the time. This is like five years or below Giannis. So let's get that together. Just wasn't like MVP Giannis. I left him alone after that. But before, man, I as a teammate, I cared about him and I wanted him to be really good. So that was part of my job as a vet, an older guy. I felt like I was probably the only guy that could maybe have a chance against him in practice, right? Like just with my length and my size and defense is what I did. So yeah, me and him in practice used to kind of go at it. Now, I'm not saying I used to put him on the block and score on him, but like defensively, like I was hell, you know what I mean? And I just wanted to help him because I don't even know if you remember this. I was like, listen, man, if you can score over me and shoot over me, you know, at the least, there's not many guys with my attributes playing out there, right? Like wingspan, size, speed. So I'm trying to make you better. And that's when we took off to the next level. Like, you know, Giannis competing in there, young Giannis, obviously competing with me and defensively, offensively, OJ Mayo and Chris Middleton coming, Caron Butler coming in there every day, OJ Mayo, like Jared Bayless. Like we had these older guys and everybody just pushing each other competitively. And that's when we took the next step. So, you know, with Giannis, that was my job as a teammate, as a vet. I want to make you better because if you get better, then we get better and then we all get paid, right? So that's how you got to look at it.
Yeah, and I also loved that in that podcast, I learned that your team nickname was Captain Hook, which I love.
Yeah. So they called me Hook because the jump hook is like my go-to signature move, you know, like left jump hook. So they call me Hook and Captain Hook because like that was the shot, and you know, it was the only thing I had, man. So like, you know, we were in practice last story one day, and J.K. was like, hey, look, man, like, you know, when you get to the end of the game, you need to have one go-to shot or move that you know you're going to do, and us as teammates know you're going to do. And he's like, yeah, we talk about John. He's not the most gifted offensive player on our team, but what is he going to do at the end of the game when it's all on the line? What everyone's like, left jump hook. He's like, that's how it should be for all you guys. So that's how I kind of got the name, and it kind of carried. And so all my old teammates call me Hook, and
love it.
That's just something funny to laugh about.
Love it. Yeah, no, I love the perspective that Tyler and I aren't able to share any stories like that. Never anything like that happening at the score. Not that exciting, but we appreciate the story time. We appreciate your time as always, John. I feel like that's a good way to wrap up today's episode. Hope everyone enjoys the finals, or at least the start of the finals. Until next time, this has been the Unfiltered Show. For John Henson, for Tyler McKillop, I'm Joseph Casciaro. Don't forget to like and subscribe. We'll talk to you next time.